Hello and welcome back to the Perception Podcast, where you just see things a little bit differently. I'm Dan, your host, and hopefully you enjoyed last week's episode with Lucy, the NHS nurse. I thought it was really interesting and insightful. This week I thought we'd talk about impulsiveness. Now this might seem a bit vague, and I've kind of touched on this in previous episodes, but I wanted to dive a little deeper today and kind of dissect my own mind in a way. Because while I obviously want to make this podcast help others, that's like the main aim of it, I also think it's a really productive way to learn more about myself, as I may not notice things on a daily basis, like little things that come up in here, and I really get to think about them and talk about them, kind of lift a weight off my shoulders that I didn't even perhaps know was there. Little things that may have affected me negatively or positively and created that internal, metaphorical, kind of volcanic eruption of emotions. But before I go off on one of my massive tangents, I really wanted to focus on my impulsiveness, as I said earlier. Now, as you already know, I'm a very extreme person, and once I set my mind to something, I just do it. Like losing all that weight until it got dangerous, and structuring my life to the extent that it began to negatively affect others around me. But I thought it'd be good to give an example of something that's happened a lot more recently. So basically, I've already decided in my mind, with that kind of super Dan complex that I often talk about, that I think I have and others around me think I have, that I'm going to Oxford and studying PPE. I'm going to study PPE, which is philosophy, politics and economics. Now, for those who don't know, I'm really interested in working in politics, and this course seems pretty perfect for me. As I've already said previously on here on another episode, I think academic achievement has always been one of my main strengths, and something I've always kind of prided myself on. Sometimes to a worrying extent, actually. Now, how does this apply to impulsiveness? Well, for as long as I can remember, I've always wanted to go to university and get a PhD in whatever I study, because education was really important to me and still is now. But now that I've got it in my mind that I have to go to one of the biggest and most prestigious schools in the country and study this specific course, it also adds a lot of pressure that I just can't shift because it's completely subconscious. And always like I've brainwashed myself into thinking that like this is the only option, be all and end all. If I don't get in here, what am I going to do with my life? So I thought I'd just take some time today to talk about this extremely impulsive behaviour and how it can and is currently having a detrimental effect not only on my mental health in general, but my work-school balance as well. So why do I think I have to go to Oxford? Well, I don't really know with that question, because obviously there's the fact, as I said earlier, that it's really prestigious and it's got a course that I could be quite interested in. But apart from that, I think it's just my own brain looking for perfection, and while I know I can't achieve a perfection, it always sets unrealistic expectations that I can't meet, and then it makes me have anxiety and low mood and stuff over the fact that I haven't met those expectations. So it's like this endless cycle with myself, like battling against, as I've talked about in the past again. But it's with all facets. It's with my legs, it's with depression, it's with anxiety, it's with body dysmorphia, or whatever you want to call it. It's with all these things you have to constantly like fight this cycle of not feeling good enough. What can you do to try and make yourself feel less good? And no matter what you do, it's just always not good enough for a brain that's overcritical of yourself and self-degrading. So yeah, I think that's the main reason why I want to go to Oxford. And it's even got to the point where I'm having talks with my family and they're saying, well, Oxford is great, but it's like Oxbridge, do you know what I mean? It's Cambridge as well. And I've got it in my head now. It's as bad as the point where I think that Cambridge is definitely second to Oxford, where it's not that. They've like made a coalition now. They've like come together to make this Oxbridge thing, which is really great. And still in my head, Oxford's so far above them because obviously they focus on what I'm interested in, which is politics and philosophy and stuff like that. But that's just another example of how my brain just kind of explodes things, and I don't know what the right word is, but exacerbates a situation where there's nothing there to like really be exacerbated in the first place. It's like a catalyst to more and more worry and anxiety and low mood about it and all stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's the main reason why I'm always striving to. It's always good to strive for the best, but sometimes you have to know when you're setting yourself for unrealistic expectations. And I think this is my subconscious making this episode today, because I know that I'm pushing myself too hard with the extra work and everything that I'm trying to do, and I'm kind of overrunning myself, and I'm really drained on a Thursday as I'm recording this. And this is just a subconscious way I think of just getting like a stream of thought out there on this podcast form, so that I can kind of say to myself, you need to slow down, calm down, because if you get into university at all, that's an achievement in itself. Most people don't even get to go to university, so you just have to count your lucky stars that you will get into university anyway. Durham, Exeter, Bath, all these places are amazing, but it's just in my head, the unrealistic expectations are just overwhelming. And the kind of next question that I've set for myself here on my notes is, where do these unrealistic expectations come from? But like, where do I think they come from? I think this again comes back to the super Dan complex that I was talking about before. I used to see this specialist about my anger issues and stuff like that. And that's the first time that I kind of really learned about this and this whole like kind of, I don't want to keep saying complex, but that sort of thing that I have within myself of just not wanting to be perfect, but almost seeing myself in an ideal situation, like a utopia in the future, that certain decisions and certain life courses and stuff like that, you're just never going to be able to reach that 100% of the time. And I think I constantly set that for myself. So yeah, I think it's just this super Dan complex that wants me to leave a legacy and wants to be important and wants to have an impact on the world, not like in a way of like Gandhi or anybody like that, but just lead a meaningful life because my other fears about death and stuff. I think it all just kind of ties in together that I want to make something of life, and I'm extremely worried that every bit that I kind of like waste in inverted commas, like just doing nothing, even though that can be good to just kind of detox from school and life, I just kind of worry that that's like wasting it. So I think that these unrealistic expectations are just a way of me going like, no, you need to keep working, you need to leave your mark, and you need to do all these things in order to accomplish life. But like, as anybody knows, you can't really accomplish life. It's just about experiencing it. I think that's why I'm coming to now, later in age, later in like kind of childhood, that like life is just about experiencing, and as everybody says, it's like living in the now. And I saw this. It was actually a YouTube video, but this guy who suffers with depression said that people who actually are able to live in the now are very lucky because they're not really existential and don't think about their past or their future and their past embarrassment or future embarrassment or anything like that, and that kind of doesn't stay with them. They don't harbour it. Whereas people that do constantly harbour that pain and harbour the embarrassment so that they constantly think back to it, and that feeds into their depression more and more. And I feel like that couldn't be any more applicable to me because I'm constantly not reminiscing, but thinking about stuff that I've done in the past wrong, or maybe that other people would have done differently, and feeling embarrassed or feeling resent over certain actions and stuff like that. And then all I can think about thinking into the future is just like this kind of post-apocalyptic existential dystopia that I kind of create in my mind, and it's never really happy thoughts. Whereas I think if I just experienced the now a bit more and took more acceptance of the little things and took more stock in the little things and found the joy in that, I think I'd be able to live a more fulfilled life and a more satisfied life, because I'm just constantly looking for stuff with these unrealistic super Dan expectations that you can't just reach with a click of a finger like that. You can't just grasp them. You have to work for them, and I think that's where impulsiveness and impatience and wanting structure and being a bit lazy and all stuff like this kind of builds and builds and builds and kind of snowballs and creates this kind of paralyzing at times anxiety and depression over such little things that people I hide from the outside world so that people just think, oh yeah, he's fine. Whereas inside, if the cafe at school doesn't have the right sandwich, I could literally have a internal mental breakdown over that, because as I said earlier, all these things have been building up, and this volcano effect happens, and then like my mum will be able to tell you, I can just explode over little things. Like she can tell me to go brush my teeth or get in the shower, and I can just go off at her because I've been worrying and feeling low about all this stuff. I've been angry at all this stuff and not had an outlet for it. Whereas other people just don't really care about it and don't just kind of brush it off. Whereas I haven't found a way to do that yet. My filter is just suppression, and I don't think that's right, and I don't think that's a good way of dealing with it. But the difference is with me, because I'm so extreme in personality, when I used to not have a filter to suppress, I used to just let everything out and used to really hurt people around me. Um, in all ways, and I really resented myself for that and really didn't like myself when I did that. So I think I've kind of artificially placed the suppression filter over the top so that all this emotion just gets bottled up and only comes out when I feel really relaxed and feel like I can finally let it out, and then let it out to the wrong people who don't deserve it, like my mum, like my family, and then they're like, whoa, what the hell, do you know what I mean? But yeah, that just got really in depth. But yeah, I do think that's where these unrealistic expectations come from, and I do think, yeah, I think this is definitely, as I keep saying in all these episodes, mental health at the minute. I know they're just kind of scratching the surface, but I feel it's very much just like, do you suffer with these symptoms? You might have depression. Do you suffer with these symptoms? You might have anxiety, like body dysmorphia, all stuff like that, but it's not actually yet, and hopefully it will in the future for kids my age in the future dive deeper into it and actually help people and not just identify you have this problem and don't and instead help people and don't make CAMS so much of a machine where it's like you can only have one appointment every 6 months, or do you know, stuff like that. I just think in this day and age, not to get support for these kind of feelings and just have to bottle them up and suppress them because you've got no outlet. I'm not saying that by far I'm not the only one in the world has it, and that just in a way proves my point even more, that it's like so many people out there will probably be suffering with the same thing, that just because normal everyday people wouldn't think of it, you can't find necessarily the help when you need it, and therefore you take it out on the wrong people. Wow, that question really snowballed into a real, oh, I don't want to say deep, but just really long, detailed answer, when it's just one of the many questions that I have in my notes here. But yeah, hopefully you got something from that. Even though it might be a bit unprofessional, I've not hid the fact that I'm a complete amateur at this. And sometimes it's just good to kind of, yes, it's good to follow a format, but then again, it's quite good to just lay yourself out there, because you don't know what you could say that could resonate with somebody and kind of change their perspective on something. So yeah, I kind of don't like doing it because it leaves me vulnerable and leaves me exposed in a way. But I also do like doing it because I know that if when I watch people that I like on YouTube, in life generally, all stuff like that, but the times when they rarely do let it out a bit more, that's when I do resonate and relate to them a lot more. I also wanted to touch on the question of, it's always good to give 100% all the time, especially in school. And my opinions kind of changed on this quite recently, actually, because I was always somebody that used to, because I was always quite smart, and that's not a boasting thing. I'm just using it in a kind of story, I guess. That because I've always thought of myself as quite smart, and always because I've been quite near the top of the class, I think I've kind of coasted through school in a sense. Even though I quite like school and I quite like education and I like academic success, because I've never had a time where I haven't actually failed a test or anything like that. I haven't had that like kick up the bum in a way to kind of go, no, you have to kick on, you have to do revision, you have to do all stuff like this that people normally get. So in a way, that's kind of been bad for me because I've kind of been able to coast all my way through, and now getting into A level. You think that if you haven't experienced GCSEs yet, or you are experiencing GCSEs, you think the jump up to GCSE is big, and I'm presuming the jump to A level to uni is big. I've talked to my teachers who have done A levels, who have done uni, and all stuff like that, and they all say that A levels is the biggest jump and the biggest workload in the world. Not in the world, that you will ever have to do in an educational setting. What am I talking about? Anyway, going back to the question, is it good to give 100% all the time? I don't know, because I'm doing a lot. I'm doing a lot of work. I'm doing, obviously, my normal school. I'm doing more in detailed notes than I would ever do. I'm doing revision for the first time ever at 17 years old, which might sound a bit ridiculous, but honestly, it's the first time I've ever actually done proper revision, and I'm only just starting it now. And I'm doing extra courses and stuff like this to kind of boost my chances of getting into uni and stuff like that. And I can't stress how important it is to anybody going into A level or anybody who's going to do A levels that I didn't do at the start of this year. I coasted the start of this year. Start revising and start doing all the extra work as soon as you get into year 12, because God Almighty, now I'm having to go all guns blazing 100% all the time. And I tell you what, I'm just so exhausted. Not physically, I probably am, but I'm used to going off an hour's sleep every day, every school day, half an hour sleep even, and then having like a 15 hour, 10 hour sleep at the weekend to kind of rejuvenate myself. And I know that's not right, but my body's always just kind of gone off that. Because I hate sleep and stuff, my body's always kind of just got used to it. But mentally, I'm feeling the drain a lot more, doing this much work all the time, not having any free periods, because all my free periods are now revision study sessions with my classmates and stuff all the time. There is just not a break. I'm feeling burnt out a bit, like honestly, from the workload, and I don't feel like there's a real support system there for the school. If anything, they're encouraging me to do more and more work, which for somebody who's not doing any work, I can see the positives in that. But then, as I'm going to get onto later, penalising people who are already doing a lot of work, I think is just ridiculous. So the kind of ridiculousness, if I said that word right, that I'm kind of alluding to here is there's a new sixth form head, and if anybody that's ever been in school, you know, anytime a new head comes in, they want to put their stamp on things. They want to show that they're the big boss man and stuff like that. It's a complete ego trip, in my opinion. But yeah, you know, even with bosses in work, everybody's the same. Slightest bit of power, it goes to your head. You need to change everything because you feel like it. That's my opinion anyway on it, and especially with this guy that I'm going to kind of touch on here. Now he thinks that after already introducing a new uniform policy to us, so that we had to buy a whole new wardrobe halfway through the year, which was a really great idea on his part, for a school that has a lot of pupil premium students, which obviously low income families and stuff like that, and just generally people don't really have the money to buy a whole new closet out there, even if they are like middle class. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, he introduced a new uniform policy halfway through the school, and then he thought it'd be great to say at the end of this year, we're going to all have to buy suits and business dresses, because apparently we work in the Houses of Parliament going to sixth form when they're supposed to treat us like adults and able to show that we're not kids anymore and don't have to wear uniform. That to me is the whole point of sixth form. But yeah, we all have to wear suits now. They're not going to give us the money for it. It's not a school uniform, so it's not. We can't even like get the cheap version, which would be school uniform, because it'd be slightly cheaper because they obviously make it. No, we have to get actual proper suits, and you might think I'm exaggerating a bit. Literally in the thing it says you must wear suits and business dresses, because obviously some women might want to wear suits, but some obviously might not. And for all the work that we're putting in, I know that I'm putting in a lot of work, but I know also, especially one of my friends, is doing work 24/7, and she loves school, and she's got a really good work ethic, but she's literally doing work 24/7. So to then go on top of that, you need to fork out £1.5, £2 that nobody has sitting disposable, especially at 17, to go and buy a bunch of suits in this difficult time where we're all like, our minds are exploding with all the new information that we're getting, all these complicated ideas and stuff, and also having to revise for mocks that won't count as A levels and all this complicated stuff. I won't get into it because even this is getting a bit all over the place. But yeah, the new uniform policy is not a good idea. I don't think in this climate. I don't want to say this climate because it's school at the end of the day, but I'm going to say in this climate, I think it's a ridiculous idea to say to people you need to pay £2 to get a new suit for a bunch of different reasons. And then he goes on to contradict himself in the reasons that he's for it, which basically just proves my point that it's just a complete ego trip, and he's just doing it to get his own way, to say that he's got his own way. But then not only does that, and I literally mean every single person in sixth form sign a petition, right? Like you've got to think that we're in a democrat. Can I say the word? Thinking that I am a government politics student. We live in a democratic country. Every single student in our year, and I think a few students from across the school as well, signed a petition saying we are strongly against this policy You could either compromise and change some bits or just remove it altogether, but this is just ridiculous, basically. It was obviously a lot more professional than that. He basically just took that. Oh, and also a few teachers even signed it, showing that we're not all just a bunch of sport kids that won't listen to rules, because there's a million rules that we do follow, gladly, because they're right to be there. But, so all these kids signed this petition, he basically looked at it and dismissed it. And I think that just sums up the actual attitude of especially the higher staff, sorry. I don't know what that was. It was cough, sneeze, something. The higher staff in the school setting, because it is literally like a machine to them. It's not, let's do this for the kids' well-being. It's not, oh, I really hope you go places in life. It is just, how far can we get on the leaderboard? How much progress can we make as a school? And how good can we look to get more kids in, to get more money from the government? That is literally how I think, and what I've literally experienced in high school, in my situation, what I've experienced on a daily basis. That is what schools care about. And it really annoys me, because sixth form, we're supposed to be treated as adults. We're supposed to have all this extra weight, and what we get in return, all this extra pressure and stuff, what we get in return for that is just to relax in our own clothes. Not relax in a way that we won't do the work, because I guarantee you, if I walked in there in a frilly dress, I'd still do exactly the same amount of work. But they're supposed to treat us like adults so that we can work on a level playing field, and that is preparing us for the next stage in life. But no, he wants to introduce a uniform policy that is completely different to the rest of the school, so we'll stand out like a sore thumb even more. And then he says it's preparing us for the next stage of life, when in any university, Oxford, Cambridge, Portsmouth, wherever you want to go, I can guarantee you there is not a uniform policy. Universities don't have it, and apprenticeships don't have it either. So the whole argument of it's preparing you for the next step, I just don't get, and it's a load of tosh to me. But the main point that I'm getting at in this whole ranty segment about this uniform, because you can tell how much it's annoying me, is this is how much support school are giving us. They're not supporting us with our mental health. They're not really supporting us with revision. They're not supporting us in any other sense of the word. They're just concerned with, are we ticking the boxes? Can we get them better grades than they've ever had before? And can we make them look good? And I think that is just wrong. When the TAs, like obviously as a person with a physical disability, when the TAs, the people that get paid much less, coming from the son of a TA for a lot of their career, I know that they get paid much less, and a measly amount for the amount of work they do. Sometimes they do more work than the teachers, to be fair to them. When the TAs are providing you with more support and more solutions than the head of year, when most of them, this is not a derogatory, it's not meant in a derogatory way, most of them have not even been to uni or not even been through this process, and most of the higher staff in the school have. They're the ones giving us more advice and support with our mental health than the teachers. I just think that stresses to the highest extent how, I don't want to say corrupt, because they're obviously not, we're not in a communist, oppressive society, but corrupt in a much lesser sense, but still in a substantial sense, how corrupt the school machinery and institution is in a way, because it's not about what it should be about in changing young people's lives and shaping their futures for the better. It's about how good can we look, can we get bonuses, and it's just awful, I think. And this is such an important time for year sevens coming into high school for the first time, not knowing what the hell's going on. I didn't know what the hell was going on in that school for the first 3 years I was there, which is ridiculous. GCSE students that have missed such an important part of their time to revise and look over the work, and they're still having to do their GCSEs. A-level students like me, they're not getting any support with this ridiculous, enormous amount of workload that they've just kind of been lumped with. No pre-warning, no communication to kind of get them ready for it. Just here's a load of work that you have to do by a ridiculous deadline as well. No mental health support, no actual support, nothing like that. How good can we look? I just think that is so wrong. And for a country that's supposed to be a leader in liberal values and democracy and all stuff like that. The fact that he got a heavily signed petition by the students, by adults, by people that were completely neutral otherwise on the matter, and just in front of our faces lied to us and just dismissed it straight away, basically spat on our ambitions to compromise and come to a solution. That just stresses to me again how poor the school system is at the minute, and how the people at the top of it, like in any other place of the world, are just not in it for the right reasons. And they say that the real world is so much worse and stuff like that. In a sense, it kind of parallels that, because, as you all know, with big bosses of enterprise, they're just in it for the money. And I don't know if they get paid more. I don't know if they get bonuses or anything like that. But it does seem like they're just doing it for their own selfish benefits. My heads of year, not my heads of year. One of them's really nice, so it's unfair to include him and her actually. But this one person, my head teacher, just seems to be doing it for all the wrong reasons, and that just provides extra stress and pressure and financial pressure and all this stuff with this new bloody uniform policy. Such an irrelevant thing that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Such an irrelevant thing can just, as you've heard from this, 5-minute maybe more rant, can just put so much extra unnecessary strain on so many pupils that they just don't need at such a crucial point in their academic and lives in general, because what they do in these next 2 years could determine where they go in life. Literally, that's how important these 2 years are, I think. So in times that are just extremely chaotic, or at least it feels like that to yourself, I think it's also so important when you're kind of ranting about it and kind of getting something off your chest. I think it's so important, especially in these kind of like mediums, like these kind of podcast episodes, to kind of also talk about how you're trying to deal with this extra pressure and stress, because it can be quite easy to criticise and have a go, but then that's just portraying and having a negative impact on maybe others and yourself. It's also good to talk about how how maybe I can help others kind of deal with this, and how maybe you can help yourself in a way. But honestly, to this problem that I'm having with a minute with the extra work and stuff, and this ridiculous of a year, but we'll get into that again. With all these kind of stress points, I'm really actually, and I don't find it difficult to say this, I'm actually really struggling to deal with this. It's definitely not helped my mental health at this time at all, and obviously anybody knows that like 16 to 18, obviously your main development is like before that, but 16 to 18 are quite crucial years in basically every sense of the word. All this extra pressure and stuff, I'm not ashamed to admit that I'm actually finding it quite hard to deal with. Obviously, it's helpful to have family, and I just, as I've said in the past, I just think it's so important to stress, talk to people, get it off your chest, whether it's in a podcast, whether you just talk to yourself, whether you just record yourself talking, talk to yourself for an hour, sometimes like I do, like I'm doing right now, really, if you think about it. Just talk to yourself, play it back to yourself. Maybe don't even play it back to yourself, never listen to it, maybe delete it straight afterwards, but just give yourself time to get it off your chest. Because I tell you something, when I make these episodes afterwards, it makes me feel great. It literally feels like mentally and physically, it feels like something's been lifted off my chest. It's actually quite freeing. But also, I just think, especially in the school sense, it's so important to communicate with your teachers that you're finding it hard or stuff like that, because they might see a decline in your grades or your work or something like that, and then they'll at least know why, and they'll have a reason to explain it, and it's not just you being lazy or something like that. A lot of the time, it's the complete opposite. And I think a lot of the time, this is obviously me coming from, my mum works in a school, so obviously I'd hold this opinion, but I don't think many kids actually do that. Teachers, although they can be scary and intimidating at times with like the discipline and stuff like that, they are just people, and if you come with them with a reasonable, like, I'm actually struggling with this, can you help me, or something like that, or I'm thinking about doing something this way instead, that would help me a lot. If you come to them with a reasonable response, unless they're absolute idiots, which actually a lot of teachers are not, you might think they are because of previous experiences, but actually a lot of times they're not. to be a teacher, you have to be actually quite smart in the first place. If you come to them with a logical and reasonable question or solution to a problem that you're having, I don't see why they would reject it. They'd at least listen to you and understand what you're going through a bit more. So I just think the main thing with this, what I'm doing at the moment in school and using this forum, obviously, just talk about it. Get it off your chest, even if it's just ranting to somebody and letting them rant back at you. As long as you're not negatively affecting the person, you're not going to somebody and ranting them like, you're an idiot, you're destroying my life. That's obviously not good in any sense of the word, but if it's just generally, I just think it's so important to get it off your chest. And I think if you don't do that, as I said, it just kind of bottles up, and you can be thinking, oh yes, I'm doing all this work, but eventually you will just get burnt out and physically, number one, not want to do anymore, and physically not be able to do anymore, because your brain will just be so fuzzed out and just not there. That mine's got in the past, you're just out of it. You're physically in the room, but mentally you're just not in the room. And I've done that in the past. And that can be so much worse than actually pacing yourself, getting it done at a good rate, but not a rate that you're just completely overworking yourself and stretching yourself too thin. And a way of nipping that in the bud, I think, is just communicating. Communicating is such an underrated thing, and I know a lot of people say to communicate with people. We make many problems to communicate, but I just think it can't be stressed enough. So I think I've more than enough used up my allowance of ranting for this week's podcast. I've more than exacerbated the conversation. I don't know why I'm using that word so much. I don't even know if I'm using it right. But basically, I think I'm done with the conversation bit. I think I've babbled on enough now. I think you're done listening to me for that bit. So I think we'll move on to the debate bit. And before I actually start the question, again, I just want to put here, I'm not obviously forcing anybody to do this, but when I come out with these questions, obviously they are quite thought-provoking questions most of the time, I like to think. If you have any thoughts on them or anything like that, you can always leave them on our Facebook page. You can leave them anywhere. I'm sure I'll get it somewhere on the podcast services, on YouTube, wherever. If you have any thoughts on what I'm saying, if you disagree with me or anything like that, I'd love to have a debate with somebody. And if any guys need advice that I could talk about in the next episode or anything like that, I encourage you so much to just kind of get in touch, because I know that when I watch other people talk about stuff, I'm so scared to get in touch and say the wrong thing and think that's their impression of me, that I'm just a complete idiot and I don't know what I'm on about. And I just get so I overcomplicate what I'm thinking, and just get really nervous for nothing really. So I just want to stress so much that I am here. It's an open forum. If you want to put anything, if you need any advice, if you disagree with what I'm saying, I'd love to have the debate. So I just wanted to kind of reiterate that this is what this segment is supposed to. It was supposed to be initially, but I think the question for the day is going to be: should people like me, whose perception can often be skewed due to the extra challenges they face, should they be allowed to make such critical life decisions? I didn't even say it right then, but I'm just going to go with it, by themselves. Well, this actually might sound a little bit shocking, but overall, I don't think so, because this principle, I think, should not just apply to people with extra principles, extra issues in general, but also kids as a whole. I think they should have much more help with these potentially life-defining moments, like applying to university, like all this extra stress and working out your work ethic and balancing work and school, balancing school and home. I think are just a life-defining moments, character-building moments, parts that could really be aided with people that have been there before, giving you extra support. It often feels like the support they give us, I talked about earlier, are just tick box exercises to meet their own goals. When, as I said earlier, they really do, and I don't think people seize the opportunity enough. They have the opportunity to shape people's lives. They have the opportunity to give people advice that may resonate with them for the rest of their lives. They could play a parental figure in somebody's life without knowing, a paternal figure. You just don't know, and I think the impact of school and other services is just, I don't think enough people actually know how much of an impact they could make on people's lives, basically. Although in saying so, I do actually think that obviously other people with extra and severe difficulties even, without trying to make them seem different, because that can be really alienating, should receive some sort of extra support, because I know that my perspective can often be clouded by certain things without me even knowing. Hence the creation of this whole podcast. That's what it was meant to be about initially. So it'd be helpful for the advice to seem more individualised and personal rather than these tick box exercises that I keep on talking about. And yeah, I just think for somebody whose decision making process could be subconsciously altered by external forces, that is an obvious reason to me why we should get extra support, because we could be making crucial decisions that we're just not looking at it objectively enough and just not making the right decision that could stop our progress down the road, if you know what I mean. And I just wanted to add in here, for the people that would argue that it's mainly the parents' duty to do this, to give extra support and help, I just wanted to give the example. Neither of my parents went to university for completely different reasons. So they literally can't, they can just give as good advice as me on the subject. So it wouldn't be helpful at all. And when the people actually have gone through it and potentially could help, just sit there have us sitting there filling out meaningless sheets like, this is why I'm great, these are 3 qualities that are great about me, and all pointless stuff like that, instead of actually going, right, let's write a personal statement. Let's not slowly craft it over time with all these pointless sheets. Let's just individually set out appointments to help these kids write personal statements and stuff. When it's just left to parents who might not have even gone to uni, can give as good advice as the kids that need the advice, I just think it's ridiculous. But yeah, this was definitely one of the more ranty episodes that I've done, and I've just realised that I've used the word ridiculous about 1,000,000 times throughout the course of 40 minutes, which I think even for me is a new record. But hopefully beneath all that waffle, you can kind of pick up what I was trying to get at underneath it all. I think that, like I've said in the past, that school can seem more of like a machine or an industry than the supportive system that it should be, and kids like me need it to be at times. But without me getting into it again, I think I'm going to end it here. I think that's a good place to kind of leave it on. So remember, as always, to listen and download on all the podcast streaming services to the episode and stuff like that. I've said this about 1,000,000 times, and I'm still not used to the script and stuff like that to say I'm still really bad at it. But always remember, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you are listening to this on YouTube. I'm definitely hoping to get more guests. Just a little side note here. I'm just definitely hoping to get more guests like last week's on in the near future with different areas of expertise and stuff. But for now, I think that's all from me, and you'll hopefully hear from me very, very soon. Bye.